The rain drummed against the windows of Grandma Rose's Victorian mansion as we gathered for the reading of her will. I sat in the corner of the mahogany-paneled study, trying to make myself invisible while my relatives filled the expensive leather chairs. The air smelled like old books and my grandmother's favorite lavender perfume, but underneath it all was the stench of greed. My name is Emma, and I'm about to tell you how I brought down my entire family with nothing but the truth. 3 days earlier, Grandma Rose had passed away peacefully in her sleep at 87. She'd raised me since I was 6 after my parents died in a car accident. While my aunts, uncles, and cousins visited only on holidays with fake smiles and expensive gifts, I'd lived here, helping her with everything from organizing her medicine to managing her business correspondence. Grandma Rose wasn't just wealthy, she was brilliant. She'd built a real estate empire from nothing, owned properties across 3 states, and had investments that most of my relatives didn't even know existed. But more importantly, she was the keeper of our family's secrets. People told Rose Montgomery everything, thinking she was just a sweet old lady who made excellent cookies and gave the best advice. They had no idea she remembered every word. As Mr. Peterson, the family lawyer, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and opened the will, I noticed something strange. My Aunt Linda kept glancing nervously at Uncle Frank. My cousin Marcus was sweating despite the cool October weather. My Aunt Patricia sat rigidly straight, her manicured nails digging into her purse. They all looked guilty about something. The last will and testament of Rose Margaret Montgomery, Mr. Peterson began in his dry, professional voice. Dated September 15, 2023. That date made me freeze. Grandma Rose had been in perfect health in September. We'd spent that entire month planning her garden for next spring, discussing which colleges I should apply to, and working on her memoirs together. She'd never mentioned updating her will. Mr. Peterson continued reading, his voice echoing in the silent room. To my daughter Linda Morrison, I leave my home in Savannah and $200,000. To my son Frank Montgomery, I leave my rental properties in Charleston and $300,000. To my daughter Patricia Williams, I leave my investment portfolio and $250,000. My heart started pounding. Where was my name? To my grandson Marcus Morrison, I leave $50,000 for his education. To my granddaughters Jennifer Williams and Sarah Williams, I leave $25,000 each. The room was completely silent except for the rain and my thundering heartbeat. And that concludes the primary beneficiaries, Mr. Peterson said, closing the document. I felt like I'd been slapped. Excuse me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What about me? Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Miss Emma, but your name doesn't appear in this will. The silence that followed was deafening. My relatives couldn't even look at me. Aunt Linda was studying her hands. Uncle Frank was staring out the window. Aunt Patricia was examining her nails like they held the secrets of the universe. That's impossible, I said, standing up. Grandma Rose raised me. This house has been my home for 12 years. She always said, Perhaps there was a misunderstanding, Uncle Frank interrupted, his voice falsely sympathetic. Mother was quite elderly. Sometimes older people forget things or change their minds. I looked around the room at these people who'd barely visited unless they needed something. Aunt Linda, who'd borrowed money for her husband's failed restaurant and never paid it back. Uncle Frank, whose construction company had nearly gone bankrupt twice because of his gambling. Aunt Patricia, whose husband had left her for his secretary, taking half their assets with him. They were all desperate for money. And somehow they'd convinced Grandma Rose to cut me out entirely. But as I left that house, my house, with nothing but a suitcase and my college fund, I remembered something important. I might have lost my inheritance, but I still had something far more valuable. I had spent 12 years listening to every phone call, every whispered conversation, every family secret that had passed through that house. And Grandma Rose had taught me to pay attention to everything. Like and subscribe if you want to see how this story unfolds. Comment below. What would you do if your family betrayed you like this? I moved in with my best friend Katie's family while I figured out my next steps. But instead of crying or giving up, I started making lists. 12 years of overheard conversations had given me enough material to destroy every single person who'd stolen my inheritance. Let me tell you what I knew. Aunt Linda's husband didn't know she'd been having an affair with their neighbor for 3 years. She'd used money from their joint account to buy him expensive gifts, including a motorcycle he thought was from his work bonus. I had pictures. Grandma Rose had noticed Linda's car in his driveway and asked me to check if she was okay. I'd seen them kissing through the kitchen window. Uncle Frank's construction company wasn't just in trouble because of gambling. He'd been using substandard materials on government contracts, pocketing the difference and bribing inspectors to approve shoddy work. I typed up his correspondence for months when Grandma Rose let him use her home office. Every email was saved in her computer system. Aunt Patricia hadn't lost half her assets in the divorce because her husband was cheating. She'd been embezzling from the charity organization where she worked as treasurer, and he'd discovered it. The divorce was his way of escaping before the authorities caught on. She'd used her position to redirect donations into personal accounts, thinking no one would notice small amounts over time. And Marcus? My dear cousin Marcus, who'd gotten into Yale on what everyone thought was academic merit. He'd been paying someone to take his SATs and write his college application essays. Grandma Rose had hired a private investigator when she'd gotten suspicious about his sudden improvement in grades. The entire file was hidden in her home office. But I was 18 and had no legal standing. Who would believe me? I needed proof they'd understand, and I needed a way to expose everything at once. That's when I remembered Grandma Rose's Christmas tradition. Every December 23rd, our entire extended family gathered at the mansion for her famous holiday party. Local business leaders, politicians, and half the town's social elite would attend. It was the one event everyone in our family showed up for, no matter what. This year's party would be different, though. This year, I was going to give everyone a Christmas gift they'd never forget. I spent 3 months preparing. Using my computer skills and the access codes I'd memorized from helping Grandma Rose, I gathered documents, photographs, emails, and financial records. I created detailed timelines of each person's activities. Most importantly, I contacted the right authorities: the IRS for Uncle Frank's tax issues, the Charity Commission for Aunt Patricia's embezzlement, and Yale's admissions office about Marcus's academic dishonesty. I also hired my own lawyer using money from my college fund. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The December 23rd party arrived with all the usual fanfare. The mansion was decorated with twinkling lights and expensive ornaments. Caterers bustled around serving champagne and fancy appetizers. Politicians and business leaders mingled with my relatives, everyone dressed in their finest clothes. I waited until after dinner, when everyone was gathered in the main parlor, relaxed and happy from good food and wine. Then I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. As many of you know, Grandma Rose passed away 3 months ago, and her will was read shortly after. My relatives looked uncomfortable, but they couldn't leave without causing a scene in front of all these important guests. "What many people don't know," I continued, "is that Grandma Rose's will was changed just 2 weeks before her death. I find this strange, since she'd been very specific about her wishes when we discussed them earlier that year." Uncle Frank started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. So I did some investigating. And what I discovered is that several people in this room have been keeping secrets from their families. I nodded to Katie, who was helping coordinate my presentation. She turned on the large screen TV that Grandma Rose had installed for movie nights. The first document that appeared was Uncle Frank's correspondence about the substandard building materials. Gasps echoed around the room as people read about government contracts and bribery schemes. "Uncle Frank," I said calmly, "I believe the FBI would be very interested in these emails. In fact, I've already shared them with Agent Martinez from the Federal Fraud Division." Uncle Frank's face went white. "Emma, you don't understand." "Oh, but I do understand," I replied. "I understand that you needed money quickly to avoid prison time, so you convinced Grandma Rose to change her will." The next slide showed bank records and photographs of Aunt Linda with her neighbor. "Aunt Linda, I'm sure Uncle Mike would be fascinated to learn where that motorcycle really came from. I've already sent him copies of your bank statements and these lovely photos." Aunt Linda started crying. "Please, Emma, you don't know what you're doing." "Actually, I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "Aunt Patricia, your turn." The screen filled with charity financial records and evidence of embezzlement. Several people in the audience were local business leaders who donated to Patricia's charity. As you can see, donations meant for underprivileged children were redirected to personal accounts. The State Attorney General's office will be reviewing these records next week. Finally, I showed evidence of Marcus's academic dishonesty, copies of payments to essay writers and SAT test-taking services. Yale University has already been notified about their newest students' creative approach to admissions. I believe they take academic integrity quite seriously. The room was completely silent except for my relatives' sobs and angry whispers. But I wasn't finished yet. "Here's what I think happened," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "You all knew Grandma Rose was getting suspicious about your activities. She was asking questions, making phone calls, and you were scared she'd expose you. So you convinced her to change her will, probably telling her I didn't need the money since I was young and could earn my own way." I paused, looking at each of their guilty faces. "But what you didn't realize is that Grandma Rose was smarter than all of you combined. She knew exactly what you were doing." That's when I revealed my final surprise. From my bag, I pulled out a sealed envelope with my name on it in Grandma Rose's handwriting. Inside was a key and a note that said, "Emma, if you're reading this, it means they've shown their true colors. Check behind the family portrait in my bedroom. All my love, Grandma Rose." I'd found this envelope taped under my desk drawer in my old room the day before the party. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "it appears my grandmother left me one final gift." The family portrait in Grandma Rose's bedroom had hidden a wall safe that I'd never known existed. Inside was a revised will, the real one, dated just one day before her death. This will left everything to me, along with a letter explaining that she'd suspected my relatives were up to something and had created a fake will to test them. She'd also included detailed evidence of all their activities, collected over months of careful observation. My grandmother had been conducting her own investigation, and she'd documented everything. But the most amazing discovery was a portfolio of investments and properties that none of my relatives had known about. Grandma Rose had been far wealthier than anyone realized, and she'd kept her most valuable assets hidden specifically to protect them from greedy family members. The legal battles that followed were swift and decisive. The forged will was exposed, my relatives' crimes were prosecuted, and I inherited not just money and property, but the respect of my grandmother's friends and business associates who had witnessed the truth. Uncle Frank was sentenced to federal prison for government contract issues. Aunt Linda's marriage ended in a very expensive divorce. Aunt Patricia was convicted of embezzlement and banned from working with charitable organizations. Marcus lost his admission to Yale and struggled to find any college that would accept him after the publicity. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was discovering that Grandma Rose had left me more than just money. She'd left me a legacy of truth, justice, and the knowledge that sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to expose the lies people tell about them. 6 months later, I was living back in the mansion, my mansion now, and preparing for college with a full scholarship fund that my grandmother had established years earlier. Her business associates had welcomed me into their circle, impressed by how I'd handled the situation with dignity and evidence rather than emotion and accusations. I learned that revenge isn't about hurting people who hurt you. It's about making sure the truth comes to light and justice is served. Grandma Rose taught me that the best way to defeat liars and cheats is with documentation, patience, and the courage to speak up when it matters most. Today, when people ask me about that Christmas party, I tell them it was the night I learned the difference between family and relatives. Family supports you and tells you the truth. Relatives just share your DNA. Grandma Rose always said that fire doesn't destroy everything. It reveals what's truly valuable by burning away what's fake. That wool reading was my family's fire, and I'm grateful it showed me who people really were before I wasted any more time trusting them. If this story inspired you, please like, subscribe, and comment about a time when